Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail, here to shine a light on the goings-on down south. And I know, especially now with all the riots and the looting that happened recently in South Africa, many foreigners are sitting on the outside looking in. And information-wise, South Africa is definitely a dark continent, because I'm looking at some of the analysis, and it's definitely missing the mark. But tonight we're going to be zeroing in on a more specific topic, but it is a topic that's related to a lot of the unrest that we saw recently in South Africa, and my guest is going to explain to us how that might be related. Tonight I'm joined by Nzuzo Khathi. He's been on the show before. He was a guest on my culture series when we talked about Zulu culture specifically, and tonight we're going to be continuing that discussion, but specifically regarding the Zulu Monarchy, because the matters of that family might even have a big impact on South Africa as a whole, and we're going to explore how that might be. So welcome on the show, Nzuzo. Welcome back.
Hi, Ernst. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to be back. Yeah, man, it's great to be to be interacting with you, as well as your listeners and subscribers, all the people that like the show. Really appreciate it. Also, people abroad. Yes, this is the Dark Continent, but there's many more things to learn about it. And Ernst is one of those people that are really bringing a lot of information to those people across the board. So yeah, man, appreciate being on the show. Hope it's going to be a fantastic show. And yeah, there's a lot to speak about. I was on the culture series. Glad to be on this one, Conscious Caracal, the stream, where we can talk current issues. And yeah, narratives have always been against people who are indigenous to South Africa, specifically my culture. And yeah, I hope to speak about that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy to unpack, but maybe let's start off at the beginning. Let's start off with a simple question that maybe a lot of, and we're not even talking about foreign listeners, just a lot of South Africans don't really know, and that is, well, that South Africa has a monarch, more than one, but the most famous one is the Zulu King, and also the Zulu Kingdom is still alive and well in the form of the Ingonyama Trust. But maybe you can start off by explaining to us how does a monarchy in the form of the Zulu Monarchy still exist in the 21st century in South Africa? That's something that puzzles a lot of people.
Yeah, it all comes from the idea of nation building, trying to be tolerant, and rather than being respectful, but rather be tolerant of other cultures and traditions. And this was the case back in 1994 or pre-1994, during the early 90s, where a lot of uprising, violence, a lot of uprising and violence was
a lot of struggles for power between the IFP and the ANC.
Exactly, which was initiated by the ANC, which a lot of people still believe was not. But nonetheless, we retaliated, and of course, we also acted in violence. Condemn that or not, I don't really care. It's 1994. It's a struggle for power, and at that point in time, a lot of people did not know on which side of the aisle they actually stood on. And it's in those times of chaos where there's going to be people who are going to try to fight for power. Those with their good intentions, those with the bad intentions. And so we were one of the last people to really agree to this Build Nation project pre-1994, and going into the negotiations and obviously the democratic dispensation that we have now. At the time in the early 90s, because of the violence, we were of the belief that the people who are supporters of this nation building were not necessarily wanted to destroy us, but wanted to take away our powers in terms of things like land, things like traditions, certain traditions that we had to change, certain things that we had to hand over to the new state, including our own independent state, which was at the time, it was created as a Bantustan, but at the time we called it Zululand. And at that time, we were not of the belief that this nation building is going to be in our benefit. So we stalled the negotiations. We kept away from the negotiations, particularly the king and Zwelithini, rest in peace to the late king, as well as Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and who is or AKA known as Shenge, as his clan name. So if I say Shenge, that's from now on, that's who I'm talking about. So yes, Shenge and the king were not of the belief that the nation that was to be created in 1994 was in their benefit, and so they literally stayed away. They stayed away from all negotiations. They didn't want to agree to a lot of things that were happening, and in some instances, they were right. They felt like some of the things that we had to concede to were such as the giving up of power in terms of independent Baltistans, just essentially destroying. And this is not only in relation to the Zulu king or the Zulu nation. It was also in Baputa Twana. Damn, I don't know how to say that word, but nonetheless, the Twana, the people of that Bantustan, and who are led by Lucas.
Shout out to Odin and Koketso if they're listening.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Koketso. Odin and I still have beef, but we'll deal with that another time. But yeah, man, shout out to those guys. But yeah, a lot of people were of the belief. Well, the king and Shenge were of the belief that it was not in their interest, and so they stayed away. So up until the week before the 27th of April, which is the Freedom Day in which we had the elections, we didn't want to be involved in any negotiations which essentially took away our power and as well as our independence at the time. And one critical issue that we really didn't want to agree on was the land issue, which is the land that's currently under the trusteeship of the Zulu King or the Zulu Kingdom, which you will see is large parts of northern and central KZN, as well as some parts of southern KZN. My family is also part of that, also lives in that land. And at the time, that land was not part of the Natal, which was a recognized province of the apartheid government at the time. Zululand was like I said, an independent Bantustan, and so we had our own rules. As much as we were obviously financed by the apartheid government at the time or previously, we had our own rules. We governed differently. We did our own. We allowed tradition to really play a role in how we govern. It's more self-preservation, more family building, more community. And that was all done from the capital city of Ulundi, which is essentially a stronghold for IFP nowadays, and for good reason for that. And so I go back to the land thing. That was the issue with the land. The issues were really about the land, and if we are to agree to this dispensation, are we supposed to now give out all the land that was under our governance? And at the time, the Zulu King was like, hell no, because I can't have assurances that I'm going to have and hold on to the power that my forefathers have created and my nation has been created since Shaka's days, but even before, with many clans that were alive at the time. So that was the issue. And of course, Shenge, as the prime minister of Zululand at that time, agreed with the king and said that we're not going to obviously agree until you guys give us some assurances that we're still going to have power over the land, which was under our governance during apartheid. Then after that, the Ingonyama Trust comes into play. It's a piece of legislation which essentially creates a trust, which appoints the king as the trustee. Meanwhile, the state still owns the property, and I'll speak about the case just now. But essentially, the king cannot do anything without the go-ahead of the state. So if they want to develop like a shopping mall, want to develop a couple of high-rise buildings, wherever, the state has to be involved. The state land, it's considered state land, and it's under the, if I'm not mistaken, it's under the custodianship of, I think it's Department of Land Reform, or if not Public Works, whatever department owns that. And so they have to give a go-ahead on any development that happens on that land. And the Ingonyama Trust is essentially a legislation, as I said, that governs all Zulu land that's under the king. The king remains the trusteeship, but he has to do it in partnership with the government. And since 1994, prior to that, actually, there was legislation that allowed the king to provide permission to occupy. Permission to occupy is like a lease given to in rural areas, where essentially you don't necessarily own the land, nor do you have certain rights that will probably be given to you if you own the land, or even if you had a lease. But nonetheless, we recognize that you recognize your informal rights on the property, and you can stay and farm and do whatever you need to survive. It has become a bit war. I forgot what the term is, where essentially you have warlords that take over property and govern that type of property, or the way that the properties are administrated, and the rents that you extract from those people who live on those properties. But maybe the viewers will help me on that end. But so you had this piece of legislation. It has now become a real sticking point for people who believe in this, or a real sticking point for people who believe in this nation building project, because for them it's a case of we must have no king. No, there must never be a king under democratic dispensation. Yeah. And they're right in theory, but at the end of the day, you agree to this. At the end of the day, the rulers at the time agree to this, and sometimes you just have to honor your agreements. But that's not something that the left, particularly the left, do not do or know anything about. They're not about honor. They're not about gentleman's agreement. They're all about me. And when it becomes me, it's fuck you to everyone else that has an opinion or tries to give their own sort of. And sorry for the French, but nonetheless, it's just as it's as simple as that. Someone that doesn't care about your tradition, your culture, but yet still promotes. It speaks about the fact that we must respect people's cultures. Must not have textbooks in Afrikaans and English, but we must have it in Zulu. But yet, when it comes to things like the Ingonyama Trust communities, Zulu communities trying to carry on with their traditions, they don't give a fuck. So they don't care at all. So fast forward to 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Some other NGO, I forgot their name, takes the Ingonyama Trust, particularly the king, to court, because the king now is essentially still giving these PTOs. Oh yes, so PTOs were stopped. Permission to occupy was stopped back in 1994 via a legislation called the Informal Land Rights Act. If I'm not mistaken, it's an act where people who have informal rights to land it's like a lease now. Like if you are known to be someone who dwells on the land but doesn't have any papers to prove it, you still have a right to live on that land, and you still have a right to exercise other legislation which prevents you from being evicted, for example, and all that jazz. So now this NGO takes the king to court because the king continues this practice of giving permission to occupy, which is essentially an unsecured title to the land. They can kick you off whenever they want to. They can extract as much money as possible as they want to. And like I said, I'm not gonna lie, it did become a very dangerous, as well as not a beneficial system to those that lived on it. So, and it was usually mostly used against people who are in disagreement with the king. So the king continued that tradition. So this NGO took him to court, and the NGO stated that it's illegal for you to even be giving people the rights to live on their land, and you should rather give free title or full title to these people that live on the land. The court ruled in their favor, of course, in terms of the Section 25, various other legislative rights which are granted to people with informal rights. They essentially took away the power of the king to decide who lives on the land and who doesn't. And this has also been an issue in terms of our progression as the nation, because on one end, you're fighting a battle against lefties, if I'm going to really be honest about it and brutally honest. And on another, you really it takes away your focus from actually building the community which is required to be which will ensure your self-preservation over the long term. And this is the issue with this situation. And I don't even think it's going to be settled anytime soon, especially in this time with the problems that are facing the monarchy now. I don't think that's on that's not on the priority list. So yeah, that's the Ingonyama Trust. It's essentially a piece of legislation gives the king trusteeship, and he's able to administer the land in partnership with the government. But the government really holds all the cards. They decide who goes on the land, who doesn't, and also another thing is just lastly is that although the government has ownership, the government is useless in that it doesn't even care. Like you've seen the stats, more land that has been taken from in terms of for the purpose of land reform has not been given to people. It's actually been kept in trusteeship or in the hands of the government since 1994. I think like 6% of the land that has been taken away or has been taken for purposes of land reform has now been has still not. That 6% is the only one that has been given away. The rest is still in the hands of the government. So it's just a strenuous relationship. It's a relationship that has no benefit to the Zulu Nation, in my opinion, and it's going to continue like this until someone has, the balls to really deal with the situation. And really, it's going to come down to a case of, do I really believe in this nation building, or do I want to preserve my culture? And it's going to be one of the two, So yeah.
You touched on it there, but the idea of the Zulu Nation being entering very reluctantly into this nation-building Rainbow Nation project, it reminds me of and something you said there reminds me of a quote by Samora Machel, the Mozambican, who said, "For the nation to live, the tribe must die." And that's pretty much the logic of the ANC, and that's the logic of the South African project, is that all the tribes must just become one. They can't have their own identity anymore, because that creates friction, that creates conflict, and that's the motto under which a lot of these tribes were pretty much reluctantly into the power sharing project that is South Africa. Now, you said, as you said there, explained there, the Zulus entered this power broker relationship very reluctantly. But if we're looking back on it retrospectively, since 1994, were the fears that were voiced by your leaders at the time, did they turn out to be true in regards to the Rainbow Nation and this South African project?
I think short term, yes. Short term, no. Because of obviously, when the economy is doing well, really nobody cares about the many problems which are under the carpet, which have been swept under the carpet, and it only waits for moments like we had 2 weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago to really bring those problems to the fore. So short term, no. Their fears didn't come to pass, but long term, yes, and we saw it in the last couple of weeks, and the past 10 years as well, and also carrying on from now on, the many tensions that will arise, not even amongst the Zulu Nation and the government, but other nations as well. Your guys' community, the Afrikaners as well, the Tswana community, the Xhosa community, which is also now starting to take a stand. The Khoi community, all these communities are now starting to really take a stand, because it's the tension. When they give you. So just going back to your question before I go on a tangent. Yes, I think that, their fears long term have come to pass, especially when Shange, Prince Mangosuthu stated back in 1997, I think it was 1977 rather, where he spoke about the fact that due to the violence which has been initiated and planned by the ANC, which is make the country ungovernable, it's going to come back to bite you. And it did this past couple of weeks, but it's also been boiling under for the past 10 years with the high crime rate. Our crime rate is compared to those countries in
that are war zones.
Exactly. So it just tells you how dangerous living in this country is. And shockingly enough, some people, when I meet them, they just still oblivious to that fact, which is really scary. But nonetheless, Prince Mangosuthu said that your guys' plans to always use violence when you don't get your way is going to come back to bite you. And people are going to learn from you, and you see that with people like Malema. Malema literally is eating from the book, which is the Revolutionary ANC, the 1980s, the United Democratic Front, their policies, their modus operandi, their tactics, the SACP, the unions. The EFF is feeding off of that knowledge, that those practices, those acts.
That philosophy of make the country ungovernable.
Exactly. And also, if you don't get what you want, use violence. And you'll hear when people, like, for example, during FISMA was 4, people continuously say, this is how freedom was fought for. So this is how we're going to get free education.
Yeah, so that old slogan of liberation before education.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it means destroying the very institutions which you want to enter into, let's just burn it down. So, these are the very things that the Shenge was talking about back then. You're saying that you guys are not working for self-preservation. You're working to just get power. And power was shifted from the apartheid government, which was also a elitist sort of community, to a black elitist community, which essentially does it. I forgot how. I remember there was Moletim Beki, he spoke about it, but many other commentators have also said is that there wasn't necessarily the reason there wasn't necessarily like sort of like a power shift in the sense that people now became people came into power. No, it was just transfer of wealth from white hands to black hands, and now you see the situation, which is black people are unable to build wealth and actually think self-preservation rather than let me eat now, rather than build, and then after that, make sure that the other generations that come after you, are able to also eat. That was the culture that the Zulu land was essentially promoting, and it endorsed at the time. Firstly, because we're independent, so largely, so it only takes so much for you to realize that the apartheid government didn't give a damn about you guys. You got to do this by yourself, and you guys got to try to self-preserve, which is why we also created our own bank. I think it's the Bank of Zululand. We had our own schooling system. We had many other things, institutions which really contributed to the self-preservation of of the nation. But the problem was that because the ANC just wanted power, and Shenge could see that. Prince Mangosuthu saw that from the start, saying that you guys are just, you essentially don't want people to grow and be taken out of poverty. You just want to change their hands from white hands to black hands, yet you still want these people to still be your slaves. And that's essentially the goal of the ANC, the National Democratic Revolution, the NDR. The way Ramaphosa speaks, you hear it in his speeches, you hear it with the people that he supports, you hear it in the media. This is what you guys want. You don't care about community, you don't care about self-preservation. And the fears that many of our the fears that Shenge and Zwelithini had at the time have now, come to fruition. They're here for us to see, and he's essentially saying, "Guys, I told you so. These guys are not for you." Lucas Mongope himself was, who was at the time the leader of the Paputwana. He also said the same thing: is that these guys are not here to help the black majority. They're here to just have a black government govern over the black majority, but still have the black majority live in poverty and abject poverty and be their slaves. Hence why instead of building an economy, they want you to give you 350 rand, and they'll use any type of mental gymnastics to justify that. yet you could just do the very things that you need to actually build the economy. And this is what the IFP keeps on preaching. You need to have, you need to provide a competitive free markets environment for the economy to grow. Keeps on saying this thing. You need some state-owned entities need to be in the hands of people who know what they're doing, and you just need to focus on firstly ensuring that crime rates are low. But yeah, the ANC, as you know, it is on a different mindset completely.
Yeah, before we continue, just highlighting here, speak of the devil, Mr. Odin Moja is in the house. He's throwing one ear in our direction to listen, just to make sure we're not getting too radical. And then also, just there's a super chat here that I want to highlight. Gatskop Software gives 35 Rand. Dankie Eisters. Baie dankie Gatskop Software. Again, every time I see him in the chat, I remind people this guy is making a video game about the Anglo-Boer War. Go check it out. Go search Gatskop Software on Twitter. He posts regular updates. He does great work. But yeah, Nzuzo, what you're talking about there pretty much perfectly leads us into the main topic of tonight, and that is there's still, you just mentioned the disruptions and the chaos that there was in KwaZulu-Natal back in the day. But now today, there's still turmoil and there's still power politics going on. And we're seeing that within the royal family itself. Now, there's already been a successor named, and as I understand it, he has already taken up the position. But there's still controversy. There's still people within the royal family that are disputing this, and we're going to see where that goes. So I'll give you the floor now in regards to explaining to us the state of the Zulu monarchy today and the conflict within the royal family that we're seeing.
So yeah, man. Firstly, he hasn't taken that position yet. He hasn't been coronated as of yet, and it's because of the issues that plague the monarchy right now. So that's why they still call him Prince instead of King. He hasn't yet been coronated, but yeah. So it obviously started when the king passed away, the late king, King Zwelithini passed away, and rest in peace to him. And in his will, he didn't necessarily, in his will that he wrote, his latest will, he didn't necessarily pick a king. He picked his late second wife, Queen Mantombi, to essentially govern. I wouldn't say govern, but administer the state of the Zulu Nation and the Zulu king, which also included who becomes the successor. People were obviously at that time already the issues started rising in the fact that why firstly is a second wife being given the reins to decide who becomes the successor? Why is a second wife being given the reins to decide who, well, not even decide, but how the estate is administered? And also on top of that, it also becomes a tribal issue in the sense that the second wife is from Swaziland. So actually, Kim Swati is the sister to the late second wife, Mantombi. The King Swati now, the guy that apparently ran away from Swaziland during those uprisings. But yeah, she was born of royal family in Swaziland. So she's part of the. She's the daughter to the late King Sobhuza, who had like so many kids. Wow, shit. But yeah, she was the daughter to him. And when Zwelithini got married to, it was actually like when they got married, it was essentially trying to really bring some sort of togetherness or unity between different tribes. And also, I think obviously because of love, of course, but I think also Mantombi was the type of person who understood what it means to be born of royalty. She's the only one that actually was born in a royal family. The rest of the wives are just normal wives, or normal Zulu women who the king picked at the time. She's actually born from royalty, so she understands the dynamics of royalty and what needs. She was taught from a young age is essentially, obviously, what is required of a queen. What must you do as a queen for sacrificing for the benefit of your community? She knows all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure why that's the reason why she was picked by the Zulu king. She understood dynamics. She understood what needs to be done. She knows, and she can pick, and she can understand who is ready to be king and who is not. She understands what it means to be a king, what it means to be an alpha, what it means to be a man amongst boys. She's seen it by her father. She grew up with a father that was a king, and so she understands that. So she was picked as the person who to take over, such as I think it's the testator. In law, they call it testator of the estate. Someone who essentially deals with how the estate is administered, who takes what, who's the king, stuff like that. Before she died, she picked her son, Mrs. Zulu, to be the successor. And she was given this right because obviously the will says so. She was given the right to decide. Obviously, a lot of people see it as biasness. I wouldn't know because I don't know the other boys that are in there. I know the older son. He was obviously in these Joburg streets having a job when he died in a in a brothel. But you know, yeah. But he was actually he was not. He was at the bottom of the list. But nonetheless, I can't actually speak to many boys that are in that are the sons of the row of the king. But I guess she picked her son, and now she passed away. And unfortunately, to her, rest in peace as well. She was unable to really see her son be coronated and become the Zulu king. And now the Zulu king, the son now only has Shenge. The problem now is that Shenge is not necessarily. This is how it works. Let me just
go for
it. Sorry.
I say go for it.
Oh, okay. So essentially, the king, a council of people, so like elders, come together to decide who becomes king. You don't just become king just because the king chose you. That's another thing, you know. In as much he has a will and he chose Mantombi and Mantombi chose his son, tradition says that you must still have a council which agrees to who becomes. They almost must have a unanimous decision saying that, well, not unanimous, but I guess majority must say this guy must be king, and we agree with that. So that obviously, you know, for practical reasons, I'm not going to work with someone that I didn't choose, that I don't like, you know, that I don't feel like is ready to be king. Many reasons why you need a council. That's why also the king himself had a council of elders when tough decisions needed to be made, even back in Shaka's days, back in Tetra's days, and Dinu Zulu's days. You had a council that had to obviously advise the king.
Especially if you have a young king.
Exactly, which was also Zwelithini at the time. Hence why him and Mangosuthu are very, very close. Because at the time, his dad, when his dad died, he was 24 years old. And he was quite young. It's very young for someone to become a king. And he needed guidance, he needed assistance. And at the time, Prince Mangosuthu was also the prime minister of Zululand. So they worked well together. And Prince Mangosuthu obviously was young at the time as well. So he was also learning, but it was a good partnership. And this is the case. This is the case now. You need a council to decide and agree to who becomes the king. Council now is a lot of the elders don't want this guy to be king. And that's where the issues really come to fore, is that many of the people want their own person to become king. And you could say that there's external influences, but at the end of the day, they have every right to say no or yes to who becomes king because they're part of the council. Shenge is in a difficult position, not only because he has his enemies in the. Obviously, you have people that you disagree with, and some may become enemies and maybe not. He has his enemies in the council, but at the same time, he's also old. He's very old, and he can't keep on and assisting or trying to, brush over with the paintbrush the issues and deal with the issues head on. He's not that. He's just fragile. It's too old now. So he needs someone else to take over, which currently there is, from what I know, there is no one to take over from the prime minister. And it's not, and we obviously there's no prime minister now in law of Zululand, but it's still important just for someone who's like I'd say like a spokesperson for the Zulu Nation, the Zulu Kingdom, someone that can really interact with the Western people, with the Western cultures, with media, all that stuff, just to explain the traditions, which he has been doing since the death of the king. But he obviously, like I said, he's getting old and he needs someone to take over. But yes, the council does not agree as to who must be king. And on top of that, another issue is that the first wife, and this is where I really despise Western laws and traditions, is that the first wife is essentially using essentially Western traditions to and have them interfere in the traditions of the Zulu culture, and the Zulu, how we do things, by essentially asking for 50%. As you are in a divorce, when you get divorced, you ask for 50% if you guys were married.
And this is a foreign idea.
It's a foreign idea. It's really a foreign idea that has no bearing on us. It does not make sense for us. We don't do this 50% thing. You die, your wives become part of the Zulu. They essentially become the wives to the brother. Essentially, you don't really have to have sex, but you're trying to keep the state within the family. So take away the Zulu kingdom or the monarchy for a bit. Even in normal Zulu families, once the tradition was, if the husband dies, the wife can't just take the 50% and then after that do whatever it is, have spousal maintenance, all that crap that comes with divorce law nowadays. And rather, she must now get married to the brother. And it's not necessarily because they're in love, it's because the estate, the assets, everything that has come by the work of both them, but mostly both her and the man, must stay in the family.
It maintains family integrity.
Yes, exactly, and it also ensures community building. That's why the reason why I call Mangosuthu Shenge is because he comes from a clan which is known as Shengas. The Putelezis are Shengas.
On that note, Koketso is also in the house. You're being outnumbered here by the Tswanas in Nzuzo. Koketso says, please explain this over-significance of Shenge's role in Zulu society. I can never join the dots. And you just mentioned Shenge, so maybe that's a good way to get into that question.
Yeah, like I said, I told you this, Koketso. I don't know why you're still asking me, but anyway.
Maybe he arrived late.
Yeah, okay. But essentially, Shenge is the prime minister. So previously, prior to the constitutional dispensation, Shenge was the prime minister of the independent Bantustan called Zululand. He essentially kept a relationship with the apartheid government at the time, the Vuvuas, the Fosters, the PW Brothers. He was in interaction with them, and he was a face of the Zululand, of the nation or the state of Zululand. And so, in terms of governance, he was like the president. He was Ramaphosa back then. So, and also at the time, he was the type of, during the very dark times of apartheid, he was the person when the ANC was banned. He grew the IFP support among Black people across the country, mainly in Joburg and in Gauteng and KZN, or then the Transvaal and Natal, as well as Zululand, of course. He grew the IFP support. He also grew support for the nation itself, and he was able to.
Just before you continue, Nzuzo, just some valuable context for foreign listeners. The IFP is the Inkatha Freedom Party, and that it's, to put it very simply, it's the Zulu Party. It's the
Yes.
it's the KwaZulu-Natal Zulu Cultural Party, but they also represent other South. They have other South Africans voting for them, but they are majority Zulu based, just like AfriForum is majority Afrikaner based, even though we have other members from other communities.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I can't say it better than that. But yeah, that Shenga's role was essentially important because at the time ANC was banned, Mandela was in prison, so he was only the biggest black leader. And at the time, he gained support, he gained love, he grew his support to over 1 million. ANC has never seen that at the time. It never saw that. It couldn't even dream of seeing that. So
Yeah, but he wasn't of royal blood. He was a statesman.
yeah, as a statesman to the world, he was a statesman. He is royal blood. He's the nephew to Tini Zulu, and he is the cousin to
Right.
to Zwelithini. Yeah, his mom is Zwelithini's father's sister, but nonetheless, this man is educated. He understands. He's multilingual. He's read a lot. He understands history. He understands culture, but he also understands economics. He understands family. He understands the importance of education. He's a statesman. He understands how you interact with people from different cultures. And it just shows how, in as much as, of course, like I said, apartheid was an elite group of Afrikaners, but nonetheless, there was some sort of respect amongst the nations. Apartheid state and Zululand is that okay, cool. I respect your independence. I respect your cultures. You can do what you guys want to do, and we will support you where we can. Just ensure that the many laws that are in our country you adhere to, and blah blah blah. I won't go into that in depth, but it's essentially saying respect is the only way we can really go forward in this relationship. We don't have respect, we can't really go forward, and that was why. And this is why they continuously say that Zwelithini was a supporter of apartheid. And it's like, no, I was not a supporter of apartheid. I actually told the apartheid government that you can't expect black people to go and work in the mines, yet you don't want them to live in the same areas where they work. It's impossible. But at the same time, he understands the importance of tradition, culture, and community. He understands the importance of independence, self-preservation, and building for the future. He's not a Marxist, not a socialist, more conservative.
And
As
he's
they
not
come.
he's not a globalist.
Exactly. You'll never get used. You'll never get along with the president of WHO, whatever his name is.
Or from Ramaphosa.
Oh, definitely, yeah, Ramaphosa as well. But yeah, that's Shenga's role in a nutshell. Shenga has done a lot for the Zulu Nation, and he will continue until obviously he passes, God forbid. But yeah, Shenga is that's important to us as a Zulu Nation. Scary thing is that.
All right, finish your thought.
No, I was saying scary thing is that, like I said, there's no one to really take over from Shenga, and even in this midst of crisis that we have in the monarchy, he's the only figure that really the Zulu Nation can look upon for guidance and advice on how to move forward. We don't have an insight into the other members of the council. We don't know them. They have not really done that much outside of maybe in the monarchy, but in the Zulu land itself. And that's the situation. That's the situation that has panned out for the last 27 years. Is that the king has lost touch with its people. Is focused more largely on its own stomach, its own family, its monarchy, and it has neglected the growth and the self-preservation of the nation at large, which is KwaZulu-Natal essentially. He's detached from that.
Just for clarity, you're not talking about the South African nation. You're talking about the Zulu Nation.
Yes, the Zulu Nation. Sorry for the foreign viewers.
Yeah, they might be a bit confused there. But yeah, Sideline Opinions explains it here. We'll see if you agree. Says Shenge operated in the Western political sphere while King Zwelithini attended to the traditional cultural Zulu matters.
Yeah. agree a lot with Sideliner. And you need somebody like that when you're dealing with other communities. You can't have a hard-headed person like Malema, for one. Like, come on, you can't have him as a representative of your nation. You got to have someone who's a statesman who understands that sometimes trade-offs are better than not than a disagreement. And someone who's gonna
preservation is more important than power, just raw political power.
Exactly.
Julius Malema doesn't have a cultural bone in his body.
And also tradition. It's important to understand why tradition is still has still lasted for so long. I talk about the fact that women cannot own land, and yes, we can deal with that in a separate discussion. And also just on that point, it will never be solved by people outside of the nation when it comes to property rights. People in the nation need to come together and understand why property rights are important, and then after that, they can deal with it accordingly. But to have someone, like a judge or some NGO tell you what to do, is just it only comes from animosity, it only comes from hostility, it comes from anger. It's not going to help us going forward.
Before you continue, I see I have a question here that I can actually answer. Johan Bardnor asks, any good recommendations on Zulu history? Well, you can start off with Shaka Zulu by E.A. Ritter. Very good. You can also read Rule of Fear by Peter Becker. So the first one is, of course, about Shaka Zulu. This one is about Dingaan. And then Path of Blood, also by Peter Becker, about Mzilikazi, the African Napoleon. Very good places to start. It's not a comprehensive. If you read these three books, you have a very good idea, because these are three very prominent figures in Zulu history, three men that shaped the Zulu nation very profoundly. But it's not going to give you the full picture, but it's a good place to start, I reckon.
Yeah, just on that, Johan, unfortunately, my knowledge of the Zulu Nation comes from my family. I've never read a book about Zulu history. I've always heard it from my elders, from them telling their stories and just connecting the dots. Of course, obviously some are going to say it in a biased form. Others are going to be impartial about it, but just connecting the dots, and obviously, understanding how human beings act, also knowing very well that they act in a certain way if this happens and stuff like that. But definitely, if I'll trust Ernst's judgment, and I'd say, yeah, man, go read those books, have an understanding. Yeah. And I also try to, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there was one guy also on social media that you should really follow. He's a bit
the Zulu Docs.
Yeah, no. But yeah, man, I read those books, and thank you for taking interest in our culture.
Well, those three books specifically, I think those three figures, if you can find anything on either Shaka Zulu, Dingaan, or Mzilikazi, you'll have a very good idea of where the Zulu Nation came from. These are pretty much the Zulu equivalent of founding fathers in regards to their influence. And you can be the judge whether they were good leaders or not. That I'll leave that up to the reader. I see Chris Wyatt is in the chat. Welcome, Colonel Wyatt. He says, just arriving, talking about Lucas Mangope. Are you? Wow. Baputa Chwana convo. Who would have thought? No, well, Mr. Wyatt, It's always an interesting topic. It was a very profound time in the history of South Africa. I think there's a lot still to be discussed there, but welcome to the show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Now, Nzuzo, maybe again, just to give people a good idea, because this is a very cultural question in regards to the Zulu monarchy. In order to understand it, one needs to know how powerful are they still today. And I think this will give people listening an idea of just the magnitude of why this conflict within the royal family is so important. What levels of power are at risk or are at stake? how much influence, to put it simply, how much influence and power does the king have still today?
It's dwindling. Let me say that the power is dwindling, and it's due to obviously King Zwelithini. The decision he made in 1994 was ultimately, in the long run, to his detriment. It takes away his power. It takes away his agency. It takes away his ability to independently look at the situation on the ground and deal accordingly. Because obviously, he was receiving 80 million rand a year. So when you're on welfare, you don't really care. Money's still coming in. That's the thing. Like welfare is not necessarily the case of, it doesn't only have to work from a point of people in poverty. It can also just work with, if you look at the principle and the thing underlying welfare is the fact that it takes away your agency, it takes away your ability to bring value to your community, and it makes you lazy, ultimately. So because of that 80 million and the many other concessions, I was reading a book the other day, and it's about alpha males, and it says that if you want to remain alpha, you must not. The problem with men nowadays is that they become beta through 1,000 concessions, and it's the little things which we take your power away, not the guy coming with the gun, and you got your gun and then you're shooting at him, and then that's manly, of course. You're standing up for your family and your community. But as time goes on and you keep on agreeing to welfare, you keep on agreeing to someone telling you what to do with the people who live on your land, you don't pay attention to the development of the people who live on your land, but yet you pay attention to the money that comes in and the small occasions where like, for example, the Heritage Day. Yes, that's another thing. That concession in and of itself is it still hurts. It hurts me to this day, especially when I see it, because I usually see on the 18th a lot of people celebrating Heritage Day, but I see all Zulu people saying Happy Shaka Day. Why? Because that's the day that Shaka was born. Was it? Oh shit! Was born or died? Sorry, it slips my mind. But it's an important day in Shaka's life, and it has always been celebrated since Shaka's death, as the death where we remember Shaka and the man that he was, or as the day he died. Sorry. So so that was his day, the 18th of September, for Zulu people. 1994 comes, we concede, we say, now it's Heritage Day. The fuck is that? Like, like, bro, why are you calling it something that is obviously cool? Afrikaners can have their Heritage Day on whatever day. Maybe when they were on the first Anglo-Boer War, Poputwa, and have their own Heritage Day.
It's the same. It's the same with the Afrikaners, though. The 16th of December, the day of the Val, coincidentally, also an interaction between the Zulus and the Afrikaners, which is now Reconciliation Day. Yeah. And that again comes to that quote: "For the nation to survive, the tribe must die."
Exactly, and these are 1,000 concessions that the king agreed to. He agreed to the Heritage Day thing. He agreed to the 80 million. He agreed to the trusteeship, and it takes him away. And that's the thing. His power started dwindling. KZN, particularly the South KZN, is mostly now lefty or elitist or free-minded or whatever you want to call it, but it's definitely not based on Zulu tradition and cultures. It's not. It does not care about that. It cares about the culture. That's another thing. Let me actually say that is that in and as much as in KZN they love culture, they love the attire, the language. That it's still that in itself is still strong. Just that the monarchy itself has dwindled in its symbol to not necessarily. To the outside world, it's still there. It still exists. It's still a part of South Africa. To Zulus, it's just like, what are you to me? What are you? What have you done? Why are you my king? That's why I say Shenge, going back to Koketo's question, that's why Shenge's role is much more bigger. Shenge is more, um, Shenge has played a much, he's evolved over the time from becoming Prime Minister of Zululand to becoming the leader of the IFP and being involved in government, and also there's a large contingent of, there was, oh yes, Shenge was also the premier of KZN at the time in 1994, up until 2004, where Zuma became the premier, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so that's another reason why people still love Shenge more than they love the king. The king, his power has dwindled. He hasn't done nothing, and it's going to become worse now if they don't get a grip on the situation between the money in the royal family. His power is going to dwindle. Mainstream media, though, mainstream culture, mainstream Zulu culture, is still as strong as it was 10 years ago. I don't know if it's going to grow, maintain. I think it's going to maintain. Why? Yes.
Oh no, you just paused there for a second, but you're back. I thought we lost your connection.
Oh no, okay.
No, you're fine. You can continue.
So I was saying that the reason why I think that it's going to plateau and not necessarily grow mainstream wise is because like popular culture still uses Zulu as its go-to in terms of bringing black culture to the fore and bringing it to the world. I don't know if your viewers know Amapiano. It's a genre of music that was created like a couple of years ago. It's a fusion of Kwaito and house music. And now most songs are in Zulu. Your hit tracks, Labantana Beuba, like a lot of music is still in Zulu. It's still sung in Zulu. TV shows, TV dramas. A lot of people love the Zulu characters. Black culture, a lot of like generations. Mzansi Magic. That's like a play on Zulu culture. So in the mainstream, Zulu culture is still as big as it was back then. It'll still probably because obviously it's an easy language for the normal Black South African who lives in Northern Cape can grasp. Especially now with the Joburg Zulu. If you live in Joburg, you know what I mean. But essentially, it's been like a diffusion, yeah, of the real Zulu language. You'll find that when you go to KZN, and this still happens to me to this day, since I moved from KZN, is my cousins still laugh at me because I speak Zulu like a Joburg person. I mean, come on.
You've been urbanized.
Yeah, I've been urbanized, man. It's bad, and it's also happening in south of KZN as well, with this detachment from the culture and more into the urban culture in Durban. They obviously speak better, but nonetheless, you can see it. You can see the culture changing not from an organic point of view, but from a westernized and urban point of view. That is becoming more urbanized, more westernized, stuff like that. Hence why people can still come with this bullshit of give me my 50%, but we in a monarchy. Bro. Yes, as women are, nonetheless, sorry to the woman on your screen, on your stream.
To continue here, there's a lot of chats that I want to read that are of a very high quality. Let me just find the first one. So here's the one that I wanted to highlight. Rhodesians Never Die says, it's wonderful to see a man of integrity. Traditional Zulu are honorable and are integrous. There was another one here. You're going to like this one. Jonathan Gordon says the Virgin Heritage Day versus the Chad Shaka Day.
Yeah.
Koketso also has a very based comment here. He says most cultures have a strong focus in the cultivation of strong men. Only strong men build civilizations that endured. Weak men were subject to annihilation. Well, that makes complete sense.
And subject to populism as well. Weak men are subject to a lot of populism, as you saw in the last couple of weeks, especially in Joburg. When you're far away from your culture, your community, you tend to just sway with whatever comes your way. But yeah, you can continue the comments.
Sideline Opinions responding to Koketso says, yes, Koketso, that is why the progressive liberals talk about male toxicity. Well, I think that's right on the money.
Yeah, man. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. It's just masculinity.
And then there was one other one, and that's from Muluri, who says the Zulu language also creeps into other languages as well. No, absolutely, I've heard that many times. Now, maybe
also
as a
language, just like Tswana, a bit of Sotho. You hear it when you go to Northwest and Northern Cape. A lot of Tswana people speak Afrikaans, so they use Afrikaans when they speak in their language. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, maybe as a final topic to end off with, seeing as we've touched on it throughout the conversation, but I want to get to it, and that is the unrest that we saw recently. And our president, I told you before we went live that the phrase of the year in South Africa is definitely ethnic mobilization. I mean, this is a phrase that we saw everywhere in the mainstream media and everywhere within the ANC top brass, and we all know what they mean. We all know what they imply. Some even went as far as to call it Zulu ethnic mobilization when talking about the unrest, but those that were a bit more diplomatic just called it ethnic mobilization. Now, as a proud Zulu, what is your response to that insinuation that the unrest in South Africa was ethnic mobilization?
I call it bullshit, of course. Most Zulu people in KZN also, they were not phased. Firstly, we obviously need to separate the people that instigated the violence and the people who were involved in the violence, which were the looters. Looters were only there for purposes of looting. And even though it was in KZN, it's not necessarily on an ethnic line. They're just there to loot. And then the people that actually instigated the violence, yes, they were from KZN, but they're from the ANC in the KZN. And so you need to get your facts straight. You can't just say ethnic. Oh, what the hell? Did they have Zulu written on their shirts? Did they have Zulu on their heads?
I'm just imagining a Tswana guy joining the looters and they kick him out because he's not a Zulu.
Exactly. You see, it's poor reasoning. Someone that's just looking for someone to blame, and someone that doesn't want to take accountability. And it's really frustrating and angering when he wants to point to the Zulu Nation for the reason of the unrest. It's not. At the end of the day, you know it was coming. I mean, intelligence, even though Peggy Credit, that idiot, it talks about not knowing. I'm sorry, but the guy is just the worst minister I've ever seen in my life.
I do agree. I do agree to a large extent. He wasn't blessed with intelligence. I think we can agree on that.
You're not even blessed with style, yet he still wears this fedora that he thinks is amazing.
He's like, he's not even intimidating. He's anti-intimidating.
Exactly. But the intelligence showed that it's people within the ANC and people who believe that they have something to gain from the ANC's power, specifically in KZN, who instigated this violence. There's nothing to do with Zulu people. It just started in Zululand because Zuma is Zulu and he was in KZN at the time. And let's not also forget that the reason why Zuma even came into power was because of his ability to have taken power support away from the IFP, which I congratulate him for.
That was described as an impossible task at the time.
Exactly. This tells you how good a populist is when he's really focused, or rather how someone that's on a purpose, who's chasing excellence, can really execute a plan so perfectly. When when he knew what he wanted, he knew what he needed to do, and he did it flawlessly. And that's why Mbeki still speaks like someone stole his presidency. It's like, bro,
He was
it is what it
outmaneuvered.
is. Yeah, exactly. He was outmaneuvered. That was the goal. You playing checkers, he's playing chess.
Yeah, I
So
see. Before we continue, I see there was a comment here. Oh yeah, no. What I wanted to say was it's not ethnic mobilization. I think cadre mobilization would be a better term.
exactly, gotta and we saw it. We saw many instances where there were posters saying you either release Zuma or else there's going to be unrest, and those were littered with ANC colors, ANC Youth League, ANC Youth League in KZN, and all those guys. MK Vets even once said it that that nincompoop they call Carl Newhouse was there before he got arrested. You saw where it was coming from. So to say it's ethnic mobilization is so so frustrating. So
What does the Zulu Nation have to gain from destroying the infrastructure of their own province?
exactly. And whatever even is there, whatever is left after so many years of neglect, whatever is left. But nonetheless, and also like when he says ethnic mobilization, essentially saying Zulu mobilization is did the Zulu king or the Zulu prince at the time, did he actually tell people to go out there and loot and create violence? No, he literally came out, as bad as the speech was, but he was trying to say, no, we can't do this. You guys must stop this. Violence is not the way that we should be dealing with this. And also distancing the Zulu monarchy from that. So it's just a disrespect. Just a lack of respect from the president, and it's not surprising that he was able to just try and shift blame and try to turn the tables on the Zulu Nation. It's disgusting. It's someone that obviously does not have a hold over his own cabinet. He's not in charge, and he just eats whatever is fed to him.
Well, it sounds very much like white monopoly capital, Zulu ethnic mobilization. It sounds like it was thought up by the same types of people.
It always is. It always is. Within the ANC, there are always those intellectuals that try to, and they use the media, as we've always seen, to try and push their narratives. It's bullshit. People are starting to see right through it, and it's starting to really tick people off. And once this guy is coronated, Mrs. Zulu, Prince Mrs. Zulu, I hope he actually takes a real stance against the ANC by not only cutting the welfare and really telling off the ANC and saying you're not going to use us as a scapegoat, but now to start negotiating towards, I wouldn't say independence, but hey man, call it what it is, call it what you wanted to call it, but essentially saying we have our land, we'll govern it the way we want to govern it. You're not getting involved, so be it. If you want to meet us, if you don't agree with that, kiss my ass, or you can meet us at the battleground, whatever you want to do with it. But you're no more going to take over. It's working towards. I'm not saying that he must just do it immediately when he becomes coronated, but he must work towards trying to get more independence for the nation, so that we can build our own and build our community.
Absolutely. Now, on that note, Nzuzo, we've reached the end of our conversation. I think we've covered the very interesting and important parts, even though there's a lot I still wanted to talk to you about. But maybe as a final thought, a question directed, or an answer directed at the people that are pretty much trying to force the Zulu Nation to standardize, that are saying that you need to become Western you will be Western and you will be happy. Those types of people. What are your thoughts in regards to the value that you get from your culture, the value that you get from your cultural institutions, and the direction and the guidance that it gives you in your life as a young Zulu man?
For me, I think my dad used to always say this to me. He said, "You got to look before what came before you, to tell your future, or to tell you what your future is going to become." And there's so many lessons learned from just my culture and the many battles and situations, the dark times that we've been in, apartheid, colonialism, wars, infekane, and yeah, just also the Bantu migration. We started off with the Zulus. Is that ultimately you can only survive if you try to preserve your community. This thing of thinking that the world started 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and now you can just become, what do they call it nowadays? Non-binary.
Yeah.
You see, you're just making up concepts out of your ass just so you can, gain power through intimidation, through and try to make more arguments so that you can fit reality to your to the way you view the world.
Yeah, and to tear down history and to tear down tradition that was created over hundreds of years by men much greater than you.
Exactly. Men that were in worse situations than you can ever think of on your iPhone, tweeting from your iPhone. Men and women who had to take tough decisions. This is going to be a bit of a tangent, but essentially, firstly, it's not like we don't know what gay people, who gay people are, or we've never seen gay people. Shenge also says there's always been gay people in the Zulu culture. There's always been gay people. It's just that we haven't bring them, like we haven't put a spotlight on them, because that wasn't the point at the time. The point was to survive, to ensure that the community is well fed, strong enough. We have an army that is able to protect us from any other type of invasion, an army that's able to put a community of women that are able to ensure that meals are cooked, kids are being nurtured, kids are being taken care of. We have bigger things to think of than your ass saying things are like non-binary. Same with the women's right thing. We made those decisions because at the time it made sense. You can't keep on doing this 50% thing. You're breaking up the clan and you're breaking up the unity within the family.
And you can also not judge your ancestors by the moral standards of today.
Exactly. I remember watching your document, Your Disrupted Land. One of the historians said that at the end, towards the end, she was like, you can't necessarily blame people for for the decisions they made during in the circumstances that they were in. Probably that was the best decision that they could have made at the time. You gotta take yourself back then and think why they actually made the decisions. And don't think, and that's another thing, because we're not perfect as human beings, this thing of thinking that now you can come and interfere with Western culture and Western ideas and also try to make a global community out of thousands of communities. It's just like, dude, where the hell do you stay? Do you stay on Mars? It won't work. We have to use what we've learned previously to inform us why we're going to go forward. We have to know how we're going to provide value for our communities so that we can continue the culture, the legacy, the generations coming after us. We can't just think for now. We got to think for the many generations that come after us. The Zulu the Zulu Nation has always been about family, community, self-preservation, building value, and yeah, it's just, when you sticking to the man. Like when we can't agree, let's just go to the battlefield. Sometimes you just gotta fight. And that's what we saw in the last couple of weeks. It's like I can't negotiate with looters. I gotta shoot them. Take away whatever happened in Phoenix. Okay, cool. But at the end of the day, if someone's coming to my house and I got a gun, I'm gonna protect my family and my house. It's just as simple as that. So that's what that's why me and many other people still find a lot of value in our culture, in our nation, and it's only going to become worse for the liberals, for the lefties, for the globalists if they keep on pushing the envelope. It's going to become worse. We're going to start asking for even more independence. Whatever you are, you're going to call it right wing. We're going to call it self-preservation. We're going to call it ensuring that the community comes first. We're going to call it protecting our property rights, protecting what is ours, and ensuring that our culture lives on fuck this globalist thing. It has no merit in it. It has no underlying value. I don't see no value in it at all. There are no principles that inform it. It's just a case of big media, big companies, big government, people who think now they're at the top can tell us what to do. And I take it and the British tried to do it in the 1800s. We gave them a whooping. They had to bring even more reinforcements, and eventually they won. But it's the same logic for us. That once you start taking us off and you start asking us to do things, such as is the case with the other cultures or Afrikaners, Tswanas, everyone, is that we're gonna fight back. We're not gonna just surrender. It's not how we survive so many years, so many centuries by surrendering. It's how we ensure that we continue the legacy. So yeah.
No, Cook. Nzuzo, ridiculously based. Thank you very much. That was a very, very powerful way to end it. Thank you very much. From my side, I would just like to say these are the types of conversations that need to be had. This reveals the true ideas that are out there from the regular man in South Africa, not some private school politician that's telling all South Africans just like to braai and they don't like their culture and they all just want to be metro men that live in the cities and speak English with a British or American accent. That's not real South Africa. That's a very small urbanized minority. The real South Africa you're going to find specifically in the rural areas, people that still value their culture, people that are not willing to give up their language, people that have a very strong love for their history, their heritage, where they come from, people that want to celebrate Shaka Day, not just Heritage Day. Nzuzo, thank you very much. It was I really enjoyed this conversation, and the chat also really enjoyed it. I got so many great comments and questions, and people really were taking part on a very large scale, and I appreciate that. Before we say goodbye, I just need to fit this in here. My show was lucky enough to get a sponsor, and that sponsor is Bitvice. So Bitvice is the only platform in South Africa that allows you to buy Bitcoin and have it sent to your own self-custody by default. This means that you are exposed to zero counterparty risk. Your Bitcoin is much safer from hacks, confiscation, and regulatory capture when you self-custody it yourself. Bitvice offers hands-on guidance for setting up your self-custody solution, and we will hold your hand setting up your wallet if need be, or point you to the best solutions available on the market today if you'd rather do it yourself. Bitvice offers the highest referral fee in South Africa for sending clients our way if you want to get some of your friends and family into Bitcoin as well. So thank you very much for sponsoring the show, Bitvice. And like I said, I'll remind my audience, I know these guys that are trustworthy and they'll help you if you really want to get into crypto if you're not there yet. There was one comment here that I wanted to read from Sideliner Opinions that's very, very flattering, that says, "Thank you, Nzuzo and Adams, for a brutally honest discussion. You guys must never become weak, creepy men." Thank you very much. That's exactly the type of message I'd like to get out there. Lazuli says, "Great words, Nzuzo." That's when you just ended your final thoughts. Khatscorp Software says, "Thanks, Nzuzo." Yiz says, "Great stream. May all our gods bless our people and lead us to peace." And then a final comment that I'm going to read before we say goodnight. Redigens Never Die says, "Thank you, Adams and Nzuzo." So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks again to my guest for his valuable time and for an excellent discussion and quality content. And I hope you all have an excellent evening. If you like these types of conversations and you're new to this channel, you can subscribe. You can also leave a like. That helps out the show. If you're watching and it's not live anymore, you're watching after the fact, you can leave a comment with your thoughts. I read them all. And you can also share this stream on social media with all your friends and family and post it. That also helps a lot. And Nzuzo, before we say goodbye, where can people find you if they want to hear more about your thoughts?
Yeah, please, guys. Firstly, please, I'm on a podcast with two other great gents. One Xhosa, one Tswana. Koketo and Tumo. It's called Man Pager. We release every Monday, and we also have another series called Free Man Series on Man Pager, where we have guests. And please catch me on those on that channel. Social media, I'm on Facebook as well as Instagram, Nzuzo Khathi on both platforms. Please catch me there. I'd like to hear from you. And yeah, man, definitely I want to get to know more people outside and inside my culture. And yeah, man, more men, please, guys. It's important for men now in these dark times to become masculine, to become the leaders that they were supposed to be. And yeah, please get in touch, call us. Yeah, if you want to come on the show, please get in touch. And yeah, man, we're glad you have you on. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. I'll put a link. It's not there yet, but I'll right after the show, I'll put a link to the Man Patriot podcast in the description as well. If you want to go have a daily or more of a weekly dose of Nzuzo's thoughts as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you found the conversation interesting as I did, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Also a nice weekend. Cheers, everyone. God bless.